Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're heading into a topic that almost feels like it's straight out of science fiction. You know,
I know what you mean.
like it's becoming real, though. We're talking designer babies.
Yeah, it's definitely not science fiction anymore.
For we're digging into all this, could we actually be on the verge of a world where we're not just treating diseases, but actually preventing them before a baby's even born?
Right.
Wild, right? But then that gets us to the big question. What if that same power lets us choose what our kids are going to be like? Even, like, enhance them.
Exactly.
Tricky stuff. And that's what we're unpacking today through this article. The ethics of designer babies. A new class divide. Will genetic modification lead to a caste system of superhumans?
Catchy title.
Right.
Yeah.
So could this actually lead to a whole new kind of class system?
Yep.
Divided by who's been genetically, what's the word, upgraded?
Enhanced.
Enhanced, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think when most people hear designer babies, it still feels pretty futuristic, you know?
Yeah.
But the truth is, we're already making some big leaps in gene editing. This article really breaks down CRISPR technology. It's like super precise, almost like...
Molecular scissors, they call it sometimes.
Exactly. And scientists can use that to target a specific gene in an embryo. They can just snip out the part of the DNA that would cause a hereditary disease. It's wild.
It is.
Like, imagine hitting Ctrl plus F on your computer, but instead of finding a word, you're finding and replacing a tiny bit of, well, life.
Yeah, and what's really incredible is that scientists can use CRISPR to target those specific genes that are responsible for some really terrible diseases like cystic fibrosis or Huntington's.
Oh, wow.
And potentially they could rewrite those genes to prevent these diseases from ever even developing. Can you imagine the impact that could have on families who've had to deal with those kinds of conditions?
Isn't it huge?
Huge, yeah. But, and this is a big but, this is where things get a little ethically complicated.
Yeah, it's like we're right on the edge of something. I don't know.
Totally. Because on one hand, you have this incredible hope for treating these serious diseases.
Right.
But it also makes us really examine the difference between treatment and enhancement. Where do you draw the line?
That's the slippery slope argument, right?
Exactly. Today, it's about getting rid of cystic fibrosis, but then tomorrow,
Uh-oh.
parents might be able to choose how tall their kid's going to be, or their eye color even. We're talking about totally uncharted territory here. Ethically, it's a minefield.
And that's where this whole genetic caste system
Yeah.
thing comes in, right?
Yeah.
It's not even about wealth or opportunity anymore. It's
It's like what you're born with, but like chosen for you.
exactly. If we can enhance intelligence through gene editing, does that just become something only rich people can buy?
Right. And then what? We end up with even more socioeconomic disparities, but this time they're genetic too. It's not just about opportunity at that point. It's about changing what it means to even be human.
So not just a gap between the haves and have-nots,
Yeah.
but a fundamental, like a split in the species.
Yeah, that's the fear. And the article even uses this term geneticism, basically prejudice and discrimination, but based on your genes.
Whoa.
It makes you think, in a world where this is normal, what happens to the people who weren't, enhanced? Are they automatically pushed down the social ladder?
Just based on their DNA. That's actually kind of terrifying. Imagine being judged, not by who you are or what you do, but by...
Your genetic pedigree.
It's like dystopian novel or something.
Right. And then think about the ethics of it all. What if parents start feeling like they have to enhance their kids, not for health reasons, but to, like, give them an edge in life?
Oh, man.
And where does that pressure lead? Not to mention the potential for discrimination. What if employers or insurance companies start using genetic information against people?
It's just... It gets really complicated really fast, huh?
It does. And we're talking about some pretty major questions here. Equality, human dignity. If we're not incredibly careful with all of this, we could end up really damaging the fabric of, well, a just and fair society.
Wow. And we're just getting started.
And there's another layer to all of this, too, like a really personal side that we can't forget about. The article, it really highlights this whole question of consent,
Oh, right. Because we're making these huge decisions for someone who... they don't even exist yet.
It's true, yeah. These babies, they wouldn't have a say in any of it. And it makes you wonder, what if, later on in life, they just, I don't know, resent the choices that their parents made for them?
Even if those choices were coming from the right place.
Exactly.
It's like we're so busy trying to make a better future that we forget to ask if it's even our right to decide that for someone else.
It's a huge question, and it kind of challenges how we think about autonomy, about what it means to be a parent even. Like, do parents really have the right to just rewrite their kids' genes before they're even born? And then what are the long-term effects on someone knowing they were like designed in a lab? We can't just ignore those questions,
Yeah.
you know?
We can't. And then there's the question of, like, our whole species. The article, it talks about genetic diversity, how it's so important for, well, for any species to survive long term. If we start messing with the gene pool, even if we're trying to do good, are we actually making ourselves more vulnerable in the future?
That's a really good point. It's like, imagine a field of wheat and every single stalk is genetically identical. On the surface, that might seem great. Everything grows the same, predictable yields. But then a disease comes along,
And
right?
it wipes out the entire field.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because there's no variation. There's no individual stalks that might have a natural resistance to it. Genetic diversity, it's like a safety net. It helps species adapt, evolve over time. If we start limiting that, even with good intentions, we could be creating weaknesses and we wouldn't even know it.
like we're putting all our eggs in one basket, genetically speaking. We think we're creating some kind of superhuman, but what if we're making them weaker in the face of the next big?
Threat, exactly. And that's the thing about unintended consequences, isn't it? We're still figuring out the human genome. Something that seems like a simple tweak could have huge ripple effects, things we don't discover for generations.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. This power is exciting and terrifying all at the same time.
It is. We have this amazing power, but that means we've got a huge responsibility to use it the right way.
Totally. And the article really seems to stress that this isn't just about science.
It's moral, philosophical.
Yeah, we need regulations, transparency, global cooperation, ethical guidelines for gene editing, and not just one country here, one country there, but internationally.
Right. Because otherwise it just becomes another way for some to have power over others. Imagine some countries decide to go all in on genetic enhancement, others outlaw it. Where does that leave us? A new kind of arms race, but with genes instead of weapons.
It does feel different from other big scientific discoveries, almost like a turning point for us.
Yeah, I think so too. This has the power to completely change the world in ways we can barely even imagine. And it's on us, collectively, to decide how it's used. Do we play it safe? Put ethics first, even if science has to wait a bit? Or do we just race towards this idea of better humans without really thinking about the consequences?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's exciting and scary. It's clear this technology could do amazing things or really dangerous things.
Yeah, I think so. And we can't just leave it up to the scientists to figure it all out, right?
Well,
This is something everyone needs to talk about. Ethicists, people making policy, religious leaders, everyone.
Because we're all deciding what the future looks like by the choices we make today. It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about the possibility of wiping out these diseases, these horrible diseases that humans have been dealing with for, well, forever.
It's huge. Imagine like a future where no one has to suffer through Huntington's, cystic fibrosis, sickle cell.
It's almost hard to imagine.
It is. But like we've been saying, this power, this knowledge, it's a heavy thing. We're talking about a tool that could, I don't know, could erase disease, but it could also create new problems, even make the divides in our world even worse.
That's what it comes down to, right? How do we make sure that we're using this for good?
Yeah.
How do we make sure it doesn't just make things more unequal?
Exactly. And one of the biggest things the article talks about is, well, making sure everyone has access to this. It can't just be something only rich people can afford.
Right, because right now, it is expensive.
Yeah. And if we're not careful, we could end up in a world where the wealthy are literally enhancing their children. It just reinforces the power structures that already exist.
It's, what's that saying? The rich get richer.
And the genetically enhanced get more enhanced. And that's why we need to talk about all of this openly and honestly. Who benefits? Who gets to decide? What are the rules? Because otherwise, people are going to get exploited.
It's a lot. And like we've been talking about, it goes way beyond the science. It's about what we, as a society, actually value.
Right. Exactly.
Do we really care about equality, human dignity? Or is it more important to just, I don't know, push the boundaries, make progress, even if it means some people get left behind?
Tough questions. And these aren't questions just for scientists to answer. They're for everyone. The choices we make right now, they determine what our kids and grandkids inherit. It's a lot of pressure, but it's also a chance to do something really incredible for humanity.
It really makes you think about the future. It's like we're right on the edge of something totally new, a time when we can change not just our own DNA, but maybe the future of, well, of everything.
It's amazing and a little scary too. But if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's that knowledge is power. The more we understand about all this, the better we can deal with the really tough ethical stuff.
I agree with that. And we've covered so much in this deep dive, from how CRISPR actually works to this idea of a genetic caste system, this idea of genetic diversity, the ethics of it all.
And we just scratched the surface, really.
Right. We didn't even get into all of the philosophical stuff about what it even means to be human when we're talking about genetic engineering.
Whole other conversation.
Right. But hopefully, this has given everyone something to think about. Maybe even spark some interesting dinner table conversations.
Exactly.
We're the ones writing the next chapter, you know. Let's make sure it's a good one.